Mehdi Hasan went on Pod Save America and spoke to liberal Zionist Jeremy Ben-Ami. It's a really great discussion, one of the best discussions on the current events in Israel, and it really shows you the moral clarity of Mehdi Hasan's position and how it's really indefensible. You really can't defend Israel, what's happening right now. So let's get straight into the interview.
America Monday, I talked about some positions I'd like to see the Democratic Party take. That meant, my list was like not funding the Israeli military, recognize Palestine as a state, don't take money from AIPAC, some other stuff. And I got a message from a friend, a good progressive Democrat who was genuinely hurt. And he said to me, "You are making the Democratic Party tent feel smaller to me." He said, "There's room in your new Democratic Party for Zora Mamdani and sort of anti-Zionist views, but me, a liberal Zionist, I'm no longer welcome in the Democratic Party as you described it, because I think the U.S. should support Israel." And I guess I'm wondering, what would you say to a liberal Zionist who feels that way, who feels like they're no longer welcome in the kind of party I'm outlining?
So your friend may be a progressive, but he's what's called a PEP, right? He's a progressive except Palestine, because there is this carve out when it comes to liberals and the approach to the Middle East that we want equality, human rights, progressive values, except on this one conflict. And I would say, spare me the self-victimization. I just mentioned earlier to Jeremy, the entire Democratic Party in Congress does not support Palestine. It still supports Israel, even while 8% of Democrats told Gallup this month that they support Israel's actions in Gaza. In Congress, it's about 88% of Democrats. So the actual Democratic Party, the organized party, the leadership, the establishment, the presidential candidates, the senators, the donors, or organizers, the DNC, they are all hardcore still pro-Israel. They are not pro-Palestine. The idea that your friend would say this is a party that welcomes Zoran Mamdani, are you kidding me? Zoran Mamdani has still not been endorsed by Chuck Schumer, has still not been endorsed by Hakeem Jeffries, had Islamophobic abuse thrown at him by Kirsten Gillibrand. Give me a break. If anything, it's the other way around. You have a pro-Palestine candidate, a Muslim immigrant, as the Democratic mayoral nominee, and the party can't even get behind him. Why? Not because of his freeze the rent policies, but because of his Palestine position. So I would say that this kind of wanting to be the victim is great, but it's not true at all. And Israel behaves in the same way. Oh, we're oppressed by everyone. No, you're a nuclear power in the Middle East that just bombed 4 of your neighbors and has kept millions of people under apartheid and occupation for decades and thumbs its nose at international law, the Geneva Conventions, the ICC and the ICJ. So this whole self-victimization stuff, it's all a distraction from the fact that babies are being starved to death in Gaza right now. And if that's not what we're talking about, then sorry, forgive me if I don't accept your progressive credentials.
Yeah. Well, I just think that it's just...
I mean, what response is there to that? Like, play the victim, oh, I don't think there's a safe space for me and my, implicit support of genocide. Like, if you're a Zionist, you support the project, you implicitly support what Israel is doing. Like, you may be critical of it, but, like, the fact that, there's no, we can be critical of the actions of the Israeli government. This is okay. It's okay.
Too simplistic, Mehdi, and I really respect you, but you are just simply making...
It's really not, though, is it? It's happening. Like, what Israel is doing, they're doing it. And they are kind of being let to get away with it.
This into a black and white issue and not...
And also, Bernie Sanders won't even call us a genocide. He will in a year, maybe 6 months, a year. But the liberals are always so far behind on this stuff. And it's always that kind of the case of, oh, they were always against this. But during the actual MLK, suffragettes, like these conflicts or protests at the time, they're against them, but then they were always for it. And it will be the same with Gaza.
Genocide is a black and white issue, Jeremy. Forgive me.
Right, but if you make this into you either are pro...
See, that's the thing. He has no right. It kind of is, though, isn't it? It really is. Like, there is no excuse. It's indefensible what Israel is doing. So right, and then it's like simplistic. It's like it's kind of not
pro-Israel or you are pro-Palestine. We are condemning the...
Well, yes, this is how it works. Like, are you some pro the Occupier, the starvation campaign, the sniping of children, or are you against that? You can't be a centrist on this. You can't. Like, a lot of people try to do that, and a lot of people don't have a voice. They don't talk about it. But if you don't talk about it, I think online, if you have a platform, you're kind of for it, unless you criticize it, in my opinion.
These people to forever war. And we're condemning people to have more generations of genocide and famine and bloodshed and horror because you have to pick a winner and you have to pick one side. And I think where I fall, I believe it is where the majority of the Democratic Party fall, where I know Tommy's friend, the liberal Zionist probably falls, is we are looking for a win-win out of this. We are looking for a way in which the Jewish people can feel that they do, in fact, have a state, that they have a right to have a national home in, and that the Palestinian people, too, can have the same exact state and freedom and rights. And I know we are a long way from that, and I know what the problems are, and I've articulated them, what the problems are with American foreign policy, with Democratic policy, Republican policy. The United States has been a failed mediator, and those who have carried out, with all due respect to Tommy, those who have
A failed mediator. That's insane. Just an insane thing to say.
carried out the foreign policy of the United States over the course of the last 30 and 40 years on this conflict have failed miserably. But it doesn't change the fact that there isn't only one good guy in this, and everything that is evil is on one side and everything that is good is on the other side. Both sides.
When did Mehdi say that? Again, it's always the straw man. Like, this is really all he has, because again, you can't defend Israel in this. Like, they just come up with straw men. That's all they really have.
Have a history of trauma. Both sides have committed crimes. Both sides have been victims. Both sides have legitimate rights and needs and claims. And the only way forward is not to put this as 8% are pro-Israel and 92% are pro-Palestine, so we win. No, and 100% should be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine, and we should be looking for a way that both peoples can have a future.
Jeremy, with respect, a couple of things. One is, it wasn't about winning. It was about pointing out there's a huge democratic dysfunction in this country where the party doesn't represent its voters. Put that to one side for a moment. I don't want to get into a long history argument about both sides and who's been oppressed more or less. Save that for another day. My position is one side is Occupier, one side is occupied. They're not equal sides. But on the specific point about how you solve this and evil, look, I'm not someone who throws around the word evil. Maybe I'm wrong. Check my Twitter account going back years. I try not to throw around the word evil. It's not helpful when you're doing geopolitical analysis. But what we have seen, especially in recent months, there is no other word for it other than evil. When you have Nick Maynard, a surgeon from the UK, saying he saw Israeli soldiers treating Palestinians as target practice.
About Hamas and what they did on October 7th.
Yes.
Okay. As long
But what's interesting is, in American political discourse, we only use it for Hamas. We don't use it for Israel. So it's, in fact, the reverse, again, of your both sides point. In fact, if you...
Okay, would what he says about what Israel's doing is evil? The tens of thousands of children being killed? Would he say that's evil? Or are we just being mean? It's not about who wins or who's the good guy or the bad guy. See, you can't have it both ways. Like, this guy is so frustrating because he will bend himself in knots to try and kind of somewhat criticize Israel and distance himself, but also be like, well, what else can we do? It's really frustrating.
Read Western media coverage, it's always the brutal October the 7th act, the horrific October 7th attack, and then it's like Israel defended itself and killed some civilians by accident. So the discourse is completely one-sided. And in terms of evil, let me just finish my point.
Yeah, unequivocally, I think the BBC, 33% or 33 more times more likely to talk about the victims of Hamas or Israeli victims, and then the neutral language of the way Israel attacks Gazans is insane. But the other way, it's brutal. It's so... It's unequivocal, the imbalance in how Israel is presented in the Western media. It can do no harm, really. Now, recently, it's changed a little bit, but it's nowhere near enough.
Nick Maynard, a British surgeon, came back from Gaza and said he saw Palestinians being shot for target practice by Israeli snipers. He said he saw patterns of injury, one day legs, one day hearts and abdomens, one day 4 kids in the testicles, right? There is no other word for that but evil. And when you say, we can't pick a side, look, the Balkans had a genocide, and we all agreed that the Serbs were the bad guys. No one went around saying we need to be pro-Serb and pro-Bosnian. We accepted that the Milosevic and the Serbian state was a pariah state, had broken international law, had carried out a genocide, had to be punished. Now, we could get into debates about military action in the Balkans, that's for another day. But the reaction is the world did not go around saying we need to be pro both sides. Yeah. And I think this is the fundamental problem here. Whatever happened pre-October 7th, whatever debates we want to have about two-state solution, one-state solution, liberals are... That's all irrelevant to me right now. I just see a daily genocide on my screens. I see people being killed by Israel every day, sometimes in the hundreds per day. And I think to myself, no, I can't be pro that. How can you be pro that? How can any moral person be pro that? And I think that's where the American public is now shifting with global public opinion. And that's why Israel is so isolated now. And that's not...
Yeah, you can't. Like, that's like my benchmark now for people's politics. Like, are you pro-Israel at this point? Are you pro what's happening, or are you against it? Because you can't kind of be on the middle ground. Like, I'm a little bit for it. Like, you are either pro-Israel right now and the project, or you're against it. Like, there is no... I'm sorry, it is kind of like, are you anti-genocide or not? And if you are for this, I'm sorry, like, you don't have that moral, like, clarity that you probably should have.
Me saying rah, 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 win. I don't care about winning or losing. I'm just pointing out people of good conscience, as you pointed out, Jewish Americans, absolutely disgusted by what is being done in their name by the Jewish state. And I think we have to call that out.
As am I. I just want to make it really clear. I have been saying for months that this is a moral abomination. And I've said this is a moral stain, not just on the state of Israel.
So why should we be pro the people doing the moral abomination?
But this is what the question, isn't, are we pro the people doing this? The question is, are we pro the...
You said that, though. You did say that.
Peoples. Are we pro the Jewish peoples and the Palestinian peoples? There are 15
That's a different argument. That's a different argument. Of course, we're pro the peoples. We're talking about the state and the government. When I talk about Israel, I'm talking about the government and the state. I'm not going to be pro a rogue nation that is carrying out a genocide, that has a prime minister.
State. I mean, again, I think that you're over. You're
all right. How do you talk about Iran, Jeremy? I'm sure. Come on, you're being a little bit disingenuous, Jeremy. We all talk about Iran and Libya and Iraq as when we're talking about the bad states we don't like, North Korea. We don't talk about the people. We know what we're talking about here. I'm not talking about the Jewish people or Israelis. By the way, Israelis as a whole, if you want to get into that debate, Israelis as a whole, the polling shows they hold some ridiculously genocidal views right now. So that's another problem that we need to think about. We talk about common values. I mean, I wrote it down before I came here. 82% of Israelis support expelling Palestinians from Gaza.
Right, but you know what the polling is on the Palestinian side about Jews. So the level of anti-Semitism on the Palestinian side is about as high as the racist feeling on the Israeli side.
64% of Israelis said there are no innocent people in Gaza.
There is no shortage of hatred and prejudice on both sides of this conflict, and the answer.
But we're only arming and funding one. I know you keep doing this both sides, right. But I'm an American citizen,
and I'm agreeing
so I don't want my
that.
money going towards genocidal Israelis.
And that is the distinction, right? Like a multi-billion-dollar project, sophisticated AI weaponry, Iron Dome, like. Some of the most, again, they've been developing this technology that's been kind of implemented across the world. So, like, the idea that, yes, we are funding this. The UK, we are training their IDF soldiers. We are funding this. There is a very big difference between Occupier and then someone who is, like, a governments that are funding a genocide. Like, we are allowed to criticize this, especially in the UK and America.
So towards a government, and again, I draw that there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets who are protesting this war, who are protesting this government. We at J Street, at least, and Tommy's liberal Zionist friend, we are on the side of the people of the state of Israel who want this to end. The people whose kids, my cousins, who are being sent into Gaza and who are dying for no reason whatsoever, and are coming home with PTSD and bringing home the horror of having been in the midst of what you are saying right now. This is going to leave scars on both sides of this conflict for generations to come. This is
Jeremy, with respect, I have great respect for you. I've known you for many years. Please do not say that this is going to leave the same trauma on both sides. What has been done to Gaza? What has been done to Gaza is incomparable to any other war zone in our lifetimes. I don't need to run through the statistics. You know them. It is horrific what has been done to Gaza. There is no comparison on the Israeli side.
Yeah. Look, I don't want this is part of the problem with the whole conflict is the need to try to compare trauma. Right, I don't want.
With respect, it was you who said both sides. I'm just saying that's offensive to people.
Oh my god! See, he literally has nothing. Like, you really can't you have to just be like, yeah, I don't defend it, and don't try and do like whataboutism, and just be like, yeah, I condemn it. I agree. What you're saying is right, Mehdi. I agree. That's it. Anything else is just like pure kind of genocide apologia, as far as I'm concerned.
Who are going through a genocide. I'm sure the Serbs said that they went through some trauma as well in the Balkans conflict. A lot of Serbs died. Nobody thinks that they were equal victims with the Bosnians and the Croats.
And I'm not saying equal. I am just saying that there is a lot for hundreds of thousands of Israelis who were displaced from their homes because of October 7th in the north and the south, and who are still not at home, and whose villages and communities I know well and have been destroyed, and for hundreds of thousands of their neighbors who are not going to be able to return home, and then for the hundreds of thousands of families whose kids have been forced by their government into this unjust war that they are in right now, and they are witnessing horrible, horrible crimes. It is going to leave a trauma. I'm not saying it is the same as the trauma of a family who has lost 38 family members. I'm not saying that. But I think it is wrong to say that there's only trauma on one side.
Let me just ask. I mean, look, I think we could.
He didn't say that, though. Again, another straw man.
And I'll agree that every day since October 7th has been a nightmare, and we are not equating the two, but it's been awful. But just in the little time we have left, I mean, Jeremy, the media. I want to pick up on a point Mehdi made about sort of how Israel has acted in the region recently, but really over the last decade. I mean, it is stated as fact all the time that Israel is America's closest ally in the Middle East. But in the last decade or so, there have been some very serious breaches between the U.S. and Israel, right? Like Obama and Netanyahu had a huge disagreement over Iran policy and the JCPOA. Biden and Netanyahu fought over Gaza, although only privately, never publicly, which drove me insane. And then recently, a Trump White House official told Axios, quote, "Bibi acted like a madman. He bombs everything all the time. This could undermine what Trump is trying to do." This was with regards to Israel bombing Syria. At what point do you think does an alliance go from strained to broken?
Well, I want to really make it clear that the overwhelming majority of Jewish Americans don't like an unquestioning support from any president of any party for the government of Israel when it's doing things that are not in our interest or in alignment with our values. And you won't get any disagreement from the majority of American Jews about that. And we do not want a relationship that isn't grounded in a belief in the core values that we hold both as American citizens and as Jews, right? I mean, we have a certain set of values, and it used to be that both countries at least paid lip service to the same set of values, and that was what united the countries. Now we have governments in both of these places that are completely disconnected from either the democratic or the Jewish values on which I was raised, and we need to work together with those in Israel and with those in Palestinian society and with those across the world who are looking to stand up for the values that we share. The relationship is broken when it isn't grounded on anything other than simply, do what you will, blank check, right or wrong support. That's a broken relationship. It has to be an alignment of interests and values. And right now, I would say, and I think Mehdi and I would agree, the relationship between the United States and Israel neither serves the interests of the United States nor is in alignment with our values. Yes. And I would argue the same would be true for Israel, for the majority of Israelis, that this government of Israel doesn't represent its best interests or values.
Yeah. Mehdi, I mean, I want to pick up on something you said earlier about this silly Twitter fight I had over the weekend, but it's a question about, activism and language around these issues and how to make political change. Zohran Mamdani in his New York mayoral campaign got a lot of criticism for refusing to condemn the phrase "globalize the Intifada," and then ultimately he said he would urge people not to use that slogan after saying he didn't want to kind of play language police. Whenever I refer to the war in Gaza, there are people who get mad at me and say I should be saying genocide. We were joking earlier how I did an event with Zateo in Los Angeles. I mentioned the war in Gaza, and there were people in the audience who were like, "Say genocide," and it was it was well-meaning catcalling, and it was a great event, by the way. But it's coming from a profound place of pain and hurt, right, and wanting to feel heard and seen for what's happening. And that brings me to a clip of Senator Bernie Sanders on CNN, I think today, where he is asked whether he believes a genocide is happening. Let's listen.
Are you at the point yet where you would call what's happening in Gaza a genocide?
You can use whatever word you want.
But Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that she's the first Republican to go there.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Look, genocide is a legal term. What is going on now clearly is absolutely horrific. 60,000 people dead.
So disappointing from Bernie Sanders. Just say it. Call it what it is. Frustrating.
And 140,000 who have been wounded. But the important point is not what you call it. It is horror. And I think the whole world...
I think it is important, actually. Language is important. Like, what is happening, what Israel is doing, and then the punishment they deserve. Like, Netanyahu needs to go to jail. Like, it is important, actually. It's very important.
Knows that. The answer is, what the hell do we do about it? Should the United States taxpayer, should your taxpayer dollars go to support a government that is doing it? That is the most important issue.
So, Mehdi, if the International Court of Justice...
Doing what, though? That's the question, isn't it? Like, what is the taxpayer dollar funding? If it's funding a genocide, I think people have the right to actually maybe be quite upset about that.
Justice determines that Israel has committed genocide, that will have enormous legal implications, both for Israeli officials and in the United States as well. I think for when, people like us, all three of us, choose which words we use, I mean, I think in some sense, obviously there's no legal meaning to what you and I say, but there is a moral takeaway and an urgency from when you use a word like genocide that is different than saying the word war like I did earlier. But I also think about, how do the words I use impact, let's say, a 60-year-old progressive Jewish woman who lives in New York, who has supported Israel her whole life, but is horrified by what's happening, but doesn't want to feel like, like the word genocide is painful for her given the legacy of the Holocaust. How do you think about the language you use, how that impacts our ability to build the biggest, most inclusive coalition to big political change?
It's a great question. Bernie Sanders, classic Bernie there. He says the right thing and the wrong thing at the same time. I mean, he's right that we need to focus on the crimes and the language isn't the priority. On the other hand, kind of dismissing it as just a legal term is just not true. We know that. We use genocide all the time in contexts where there hasn't been a legal determination. The United States government has recognized the Rohingya genocide, has recognized the genocide in Xinjiang of the Uyghurs. We did not wait for the International Court of Justice on either of those issues. And by the way, by the time the ICJ rules on this, it'll be too late for the Palestinians of Gaza, because it tends to take several years for the ICJ to make a ruling on genocide. What they did do, by the way, last year, just while we're on the ICJ, is they put out a series of protective measures that needed to be followed by Israel. Israel violated all of them, like end bombing, keep track of civilians, end incitement. They violated every single one of those ICJ measures from a year ago. But on the specific question of language and building a coalition, look, I'm in favor of building coalitions. I want the violence to stop. I don't care about one state solution. I don't care about any of that. I want the violence to stop. That is my only priority right now as a journalist and as a human being and as an American citizen. And if that means building a coalition, accepting people who have come late to the party, fine. I do also think there needs to be a reckoning and accountability at some point for the people in power, right? There's a difference between a politician who has sent money and arms to Israel, who suddenly has a change late in the day because they want to win a primary, versus, well-meaning citizens or activists who, finally came around to realize I can't defend what Israel's doing anymore. So that's one thing. In terms of the language, look, I recognize that Jews are the victims of the worst genocide in modern history, the Holocaust. Therefore, when we talk about genocide in relation to anything to do with the Jewish people, we have to be careful. I'm the person who says we need to recognize the danger of anti-Semitic tropes. We need to recognize how sensitive this issue is. Having said that, and somebody asked me this question at an event, like, what would you say to a Jewish person who says this hurts me? And I would say, what about the Palestinian right to be able to say their truth? What about the Palestinians' right to have their reality be recognized? And I think that's quite important here. I do think there are ways you can do it in a way that is sensitive. For example, when I talk about genocide, I make the point to the 60-year-old progressive Jewish grandmother who has memories of the Holocaust. I would say, listen to Israeli historians of the Holocaust. Listen to Omar Bartov of Brown University. Listen to Amos Goldberg of Hebrew University, who we've just published today on the subject of genocide. Listen to Raz Siegel. Listen to Shmuel Liederman. Listen to Daniel Blattman, Israeli historians of the Holocaust. They're saying, this isn't exactly like the Holocaust, of course, but this is a genocide. Listen to, for example, Michael Ben-Yair, former Attorney General of Israel, from a much more left-wing period in Israeli history, as Jeremy will remember, from the 90s. He just tweeted this week, we Jews endured a genocide, now we're doing a genocide to another people. So that is what I would say to open-minded, good faith, Jewish, liberal Zionist friends, colleagues, fellow progressives who say this language of genocide is offensive. I would say, listen to the Holocaust historians, listen to the genocide scholars, listen to the former AG of Israel, and listen to Palestinians who have a right to tell their truth, who shouldn't have to be the victims of a genocide, but also victims of a genocide who have to then be silent about the genocide they're enduring.
Yeah. Jeremy, how do you think about this question of language, the term genocide, coalition building?
I mean, look, I think that it is absolutely possible, the way that Bernie Sanders just did, and much of what Mehdi has said and you have said, it is absolutely possible to talk about the absolute moral horror of this, and to talk about just how wrong this is, how we can't live with it, how this has got to stop. You can do all of that without having to apply that label. And I
That's so strange to me. Like, okay, how many people, how many children, women have to be slaughtered for it to be a genocide? 100,000? 300,000? A million? Like, what arbitrary number determines it? Because I don't think it's necessarily about the number. I think it's about the treatment and how the Western media have been complicit, how international law and human rights have not been respected. It's not just about, oh, it's it's a hurty word. No, this is an ethnic cleansing, at least, and clearly a genocide. Like, this guy in a year, maybe 2 years, will be like, yeah, okay, I was wrong. But why is this specific to... I mean, again, there's been plenty of genocide since 1945. And there'll, sadly, maybe be more in the future. Like, this isn't a unique thing, unfortunately. I wish it was, but it's not.
just can't quite grasp. It does feel like a gotcha game, that it is trying to force people into using a single word when I'm willing to, describe this in any way and admit in any way.
How is it a gotcha? It's just a label that describes the mass slaughter of a peoples. Like, so genocide is a destruction of a ethnicity, people's religion, in part or in whole. That's the legal definition. This is what is happening in Gaza de facto right now. It's that simple. Like, I don't really care about your feelings on this. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we need to look at the evidence and the facts. We need to be rational about this.
That this is an absolutely inhuman, awful situation that I want nothing to do with, but I don't want to use that term to describe it.
Why?
Right? And to me, I'm a little older than the 60-year-old grandmother. I object to your 60-year-old grandmother thing. It is very, very painful for my family, who lost many people in the Holocaust. The Holocaust is the origin story of the law of genocide. It is very painful. And it is very painful for Palestinians what is happening. And we can talk about the pain of what is happening and the horror of what is happening to the Palestinian people without forcing people like me and my younger sister in Queens to use the word. And if we refuse to use the word, to somehow say, well, then clearly you don't have morals, then clearly you are not welcome in our space. This notion that somebody who may...
No one's forcing you to use this word. We're just calling it what it is. I mean, you don't have to use that word, but you can't condemn people who do when it fits the legal definition.
Support the right of the Jewish people to have a state of their own isn't welcome in progressive spaces. This notion that somehow, that Zionists are not welcome, people who don't use the word genocide aren't welcome, we're going to be booed if we don't use that word. I just ask people who are looking to actually save lives, who are looking to make peace, who are looking to find solutions, to realize that we can be stronger together if we are not forcing each other to use these words.
Just to be clear, neither me nor Tommy have said any of those things. You're talking about someone else.
No, I'm talking in general.
We've not said any of that stuff. I've not said any of that. I would never force you to use a word.
That it does happen in progressive.
It does happen, but it does happen. But my point is not that. My point is about truth. Like, I think language should be truthful. It shouldn't just be about whether you offend or not offend people. And I think, just to go back to your point, you said about forcing you to use a word. I would never want to force you to use a word, and I hope vice versa. But it works both ways. When you say that somebody says to you to force you to do genocide and you don't want to, fine. But the people who do use the word genocide are accused of doing blood libels. They're accused of being anti-Semites. You would accept,
not
would you
me.
not?
Right, of course, but not
exactly.
by me.
But you would accept that when I say Israel is committing a genocide, you don't agree with me.
I would phrase both sides, but I know you'll get mad at me. But both sides do that.
But
yes,
look, on this, both sides is appropriate. But my point being, you do recognize that there is a huge pressure now.
Absolutely.
And I would ask you this: you said the word gotcha earlier. It's not a gotcha because I don't get as many chances to have these conversations. So I appreciate Tommy and Crooked for having this conversation. But Jeremy, I genuinely want to ask you in good faith: when you hear Omar Bartov and all these Holocaust historians, Jews, Israelis, saying we studied the Holocaust and we think Gaza is a genocide, what do you genuinely think about that? Does that make you think again? I'm just wondering.
I feel absolutely no need to get to the point where I'm comfortable with that word. God bless.
That's insane. No need. So all of them, all 2 million people could be killed. No. That's just incomprehensible to me.
The scholars who, really look into this, the lawyers who understand the ins and the outs, this word was only invented 70 years ago. There have been plenty of mass killings and horrors throughout human history.
Jeremy,
right?
but if I said the Nazis didn't do a genocide, you would rightly call me a Holocaust denier. So you do put value in the word in certain places.
As 1 million Armenians were being killed by the Turks, nobody was arguing over, do we need to call it a genocide?
But now we have this term, Jeremy. Come on.
Right, but the issue isn't what we call it, and there's.
Yes, it is. It is. Language shapes our world and what's acceptable and what isn't. Like, it does massively. It mediates, especially legally, what Israel have been doing. Like, we need to be very specific and categorize what has been happening over the last 2 years in Israel. And obviously, legal scholars in the future, be it 5-10 years, will deem this a genocide. Like, what is happening right now is monstrous. And to say, oh no, we can't call it a genocide, like, even if 1 million people we can't call it. It's totally insane.
No need to force people into that place. If one
there's a legal argument, but yes, put that to one side.
Right. So leave it to the courts. Leave it to ultimately there will be a legal decision. Ultimately, there will be that call made, and people will have to face.
What do you call Gaza out of interest? Do you call it crime against humanity, war crime?
A moral abomination. It violates every sense of who I am. Jewish people should not be doing to other people what was.
But in terms of accountability, it's a crime, right? People should be held to account.
What is happening to starve another people, to deny food, to deny medical aid, to destroy 90% of the housing. I mean, this is a crime, what is happening, and there needs to be accountability. I'm completely there on that. But for me, I am not comfortable using that term, and I think that in the interest of trying to keep some form of coalition built across lines that bring together Jewish Americans and Muslim Americans and Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, progressive Americans, it is really important to understand why it is so hard and painful for us to use that word to describe this, and we are willing to admit how horrible it is and to work across lines to try to solve.
That's such a liberal take, just making it about you. Like, yes, tens of thousands of babies and children, women are being killed, but it hurts my feeling. It's like, it's so strange. Like, this isn't about you. This is about what's happening in Palestine right now. Like, the murder, the slaughter, the famine, the death, the destruction.
But feel cornered on the issue of the word.
One thing I would say is that according to the polls, last year, a year ago, 1 in 3 American Jews thought it was a genocide in Gaza. So it's not like it's a universal position in the Jewish. I would argue that number's probably higher now if you poll them again.
There's no universal positions in the Jewish community. If we can at least take one thing away
or in the Muslim community, or in the Muslim community.
Well, listen, I want to thank you both so much for this conversation. I know damn well how challenging it can be to talk publicly about all the things we covered today. There's a cottage industry of people on both sides who look for ways to take you out of context and slap the shit out of you. Hi, Jonathan Greenblatt. Good to see you again. So thank you both for talking with me, for the work you're doing, and I just really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thanks for making the space for this, Tommy. Mehdi, I respect you deeply, and I really appreciate it. We may disagree on things, but I have the highest respect for you.
Right back at you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah, and there you go. Like, there is no excuse for what's happening. It's a genocide. It will be deemed a genocide. And if it doesn't, it will in the opinion of the public. And that's all that matters, really. They see it every day. They see it on their screens. And it really has to be a push for the implementation of international law. Like, because it does give carte blanche to Russia, to bad actors, to then be like, well, Israel did it. Israel committed a genocide. Why do they get away with it? If Western values, so-called values, democracy, equality, has any meaning, human rights, the rule of law, Israel needs to be punished. Israel, Netanyahu, need to be accountable for the genocide. And if they don't, the 21st century is going to be a horrible place to live. I'm sorry, it will. Like, geopolitically, there's going to be, untold, death and destruction. So, on that depressing note, I'll see you in the next video.